Hello, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Barth Eboa, who is a professor of social work at Kutztown University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Eboa has extensive research and teaching experience, mainly with runaway and homeless youth, international migration, immigration families, domestic violence, social welfare, poverty and development, and social work practice in Africa. Originally hailing from the beautiful country of Ghana in Africa, Dr. Eboa moved to India for undergraduate education. He finally moved to US and received a doctoral degree in social work from the prestigious University of Pennsylvania. As you may have noticed by now, Dr. Eboa has an amazing experience and expertise when it comes to diversity and inclusion issues, as well as how our culture, religion, and beliefs shape our work and business. Welcome, Dr. Eboa, once again, and thank you once again for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
This is a small class project which we have for our diversity and inclusion class, Dr. Eboa. And, we can talk about a few questions and, hopefully we'll have a good discussion. The first question I have for you is, mainly with regards to your own personal belief, when it comes to your belief system in your culture. So what would you identify yourself as a predominant religion or belief system in your culture?
Well, as you rightly pointed out, I am from Ghana, but I also belong to, in Ghana, we have several ethnic groups. I belong to one of the ethnic groups called the Akan, that's the main ethnic group. And amongst the Akans, we also have some subdivisions, mainly Amebonon, coming from the north, towards the northern Ghana. So the religion and the culture there, it's fairly specific to that religion and that region. We have had Christianity, mainly in my own area, and when I was growing up, because of the missionaries and the educational system, Catholic religion was predominant, and they started the primaries and middle schools there. As a result of that, if you attended the school, you will have to convert. So although my parents practiced traditional religion, there was that conflict between having to convert to Catholicism and also having to observe my own traditional belief systems in terms of what my parents saw as their spiritual leaning, in terms of what they practice. And if you ask them what will be their religion, they will tell you that that's what it is. So I learned Catholicism quite well and went to church to foster my education. Mm-hmm. But I actually lived a life and followed what the practices that my parents had.
Sounds.
With that, do we have a label for it? We don't. It's just that we believe in one universal God, and that we worship that God through our ancestors. That's what we practice. We believe that when someone passes from this earth, they make a transition to the next world, which will be the world of the ancestors. So most of our practices are around veneration and around respecting and counting ourselves and feeling the presence of even those who have departed. So that's really the essence of what we do.
Yeah, thank you so much. If I can summarize that, it's the people of the world, where we identify ourselves with our ancestors, and then due to various other factors, how that has been transformed in the recent history into different beliefs and different religious practices, quite tied to moving away from your individual belief, as to how the society in general is set up. And one of the obvious question which comes to mind is the traditional role for men and women in your culture. So that the second question is, what are the traditional roles for men and women in your culture?
You see, this is a question that sometimes can be answered straightforwardly and say this is what the roles are. But if you understand the culture itself, you see that the answer is not as simple as we will imagine. Uh, the roles will depend on age, the age of the individual, male, female. It depends on the rank, and it depends on the title that the person holds. So the society assigns these things. Obviously, there are certain roles that we expect those roles to go to women, female, and there are certain roles that we expect will go to men. And they are around and because we originally we were a farming community, so it was around, if you talk about the work, the men would be the one cutting the grass and preparing the land for planting, and then women join in the planting and then the harvest as well. So that's the structure, the setup, and then even children participated in it. But as the female or the women grow, grow to at some age from a marriage. I think it's actually when they have to marry and leave at some point. The men rather stay behind.
Mm-hmm.
So there is the investment is usually in the men. Because the female is going to join another family. We are matrilineal, but we also are patrilocal. So that's how this works in that society. But in terms of power and that hierarchy, that maybe when you say what are the roles you're alluding to, that's the part that, as I said, it depends on the age and sometimes the function. Our political system is through chieftaincies. Some people call them kings and all, but actually it's actually chieftaincy, and it's family based, and each family is those who claim some kind of uh, original, because the history is written, and sometimes it's written to favor certain families, and those families who happen to be included become the representative, the governors. They send representatives from their families to sit on the council. So they will require two. They will send a female and a male. And this is where, if you really want to look at the power structure, you will see that in our society, that role is not really separated. One row is not complete unless it has the dual parts. So that if you have someone serving as the chief, you will need someone who will be the queen mother to balance, so that that person does not go overboard. So we recognized long time ago that men tend to be temperamental, and the female will be serving as the balance. So the decision could not be made by one single individual. You see, so if you want to just say this is the one has power more than the other, it may be fairly obvious when they sit in the state and when the rituals are being performed. But in essence, in decision making, one person would not be, it is not sufficient. Each one would have to contribute or have a specific role that has to be completed in order for some major thing to happen. You know, and it's interesting because the gender thing doesn't disappear with
Mm-hmm.
all this nice discussion that I'm having with you here, um, because you see that, uh, and I get a little bit concerned when I have to talk about this. If in fact the men and women have some kind of parity in that system, then there will be no point for for a female to be elevated into a man's status.
Mm-hmm.
But it happens when the female achieves certain age, especially when they pass 70 and going 90, and some of them, those who outlive their peers, get invited and can do all the things that men would do. So I guess that maybe it's actually related to some other issues, other than maybe the fact that they're older and they're wiser. I just don't. I think that that in itself is an indication that maybe we put value more on men than women. Other than that, if we are talking about it, that's what happens. Is just sometimes things happen at the background. It's not at the forefront. So any visitor to the society will observe all kinds of things and think that the men have power over the women. It might not be so.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you. Now, one final question is, as you talked about your beliefs and practices, and how has that shaped how you work, how you perform your day-to-day activities?
Well, in many ways, I cannot answer this question without actually thinking and comparing myself with my colleagues here. You know, the the certainty of what I do and the understanding of who I am, an understanding of the cultural systems that I come from, actually helps in many ways, in the sense that uh, I understand issues, and I also I'm guided by the wisdom of the ancestors. And this might sound very interesting indeed. I would have to explain to your viewers, because I think for me, saying guided by ancestors, one might think about some superstition and all that. That's not the case. What I'm talking about is the the fact that when one thing I have, um, culturally, I operate in, I can actually change what do you call modes. I'm trying to find a word to classify it. I have about 3 modes of thinking. One is, of course, the Western thinking and how you do things, and maybe you can say scientific in one way or the other, because I have been here, I understand the culture, I mean, the system and how it works. And then the other, I have spent some time in the East, as you said. So I also understand the Eastern philosophy. And then I also have my own traditional and cultural belief systems. You know, so all these practices somehow overlap in some other ways. So it gives me the best of everything. So in terms of, and then also one of the issues that is fundamental in our culture is you understanding life and death,
Mm-hmm.
and that it takes away one aspect of um, the concern that many people have, the fear of death.
Mm-hmm.
So that in itself, I think, provides me my understanding of death, and my understanding of working towards acceptance, uh, and understanding that this is not something to be feared, but something to be embraced. That sets me apart from the others, and somehow um, kind of gives me that reassurance and that stability in making decisions and going forward without necessarily experiencing anxieties and concerns and all that. You see, so those type of ways of thinking uh, came from my cultural upbringing, you know, and so I would say that that has really helped in so many ways, or that is what has made me who I am, and I'm able to what someone said, the um, a nerve of failure. You, I don't. I'm not scared of failing, and I'm not. And I'm not overly taken away or by success. And those type of ability to actually stay above these things is something that is part of my cultural upbringing. This was something that I traditionally I learned from my parents. And by the way, it's not everyone who grew up in Ghana or from my own culture had actually learned it. I was just only fortunate to be um, to be uh, socialized by the family members who believed in the traditional practices. And
Mm,
also my dad was a very, very powerful person who fought the Catholic influence and tried to preserve our traditions. So as much as that was good, it also obviously, as I said, I was caught in between because if I went to school, I had to do something that was a dual modality, I guess. And when you come home, they teach you something here. When you come home, dad would say, that's not how it should be, you
mhm,
know. But that was something that could have created a problem. Maybe your viewer would say, wasn't that a conflict? No. I have had some time at this age to reflect on all these things to make meaning.
mhm,
And I think it was really fairly helpful, and it's part of my advocacy and part of my own thinking of how I'm challenging colonialism, because I think that was something that created problems for others who did not get a chance to spend time with traditional parents,
mhm.
you know.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you, Dr. Eboa, for your time once again. I highly appreciate the frank answers to the questions. Thank you once again for taking this time out for me. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Today I have with me Dr. Zue Liu. He is a board certified toxicologist who has had over 20 years of experience working in agrochemical as well as pharmaceutical companies. He has an interesting background. He's originally from mainland China, where he received his PhD, and then he immigrated to US, and he has been working in the corporate sector within the US for the past 20 years, I've already mentioned. So that is one of the reasons why I chose him for this interview, because of his diverse background, mainly with its origins in China and his experience of living in the US for an extended period of time. So welcome, Dr. Lu. Let's start the Q&A session. There is no right or wrong answer. We're just trying to understand your perspective on the culture, religion, and how culture, religion play a role in shaping your work philosophy within the companies which you have been working for. So the first question we have is for you is, what do you think is the predominant religion or belief system in your culture?
In mainland China, people live there. I think that right now the majority of people they don't have any religion, and but of course, I think their culture, their believing system have being influenced by, the Confucianism and the Buddhism and the Taoism. Yeah, I think that's China has a long history of like 2,000, 3,000 years, and so I think in the last 30 years, in the last like 70 years, in the last 100 years, there was so many things, so many changes happened. I think people tend to, basically adapt a different philosophy in dealing with the rapidly changing world.
Yeah. And I mean, having come from a country which is, south of China,
Mhm.
we have seen a lot of, interchange and exchange of cultures between those two countries, right, for
Mhm.
generations. So, like quite, tied to the first question is, it's almost like a follow-up, like what are the traditional roles for men and women in your culture, especially like coming from mainland China, moving to
Mhm.
US, and how, you have been able to balance those out.
If you talk about traditionally, if you talk about 100 years ago, like more than 70, 80 years ago, I think traditionally the main, go out, make money and support the family. And the women just stay at home, take care of, their husband and children. Yeah, but in the last like 70 years, and especially in the last 40 years, I think China has a very famous saying. So women hold up, like half of the sky. So women become, they have, kind of more equal opportunity to be educated, to be promoted in the workplace, and also to be participating in the workplace. Yeah, I say, I read a kind of a newspaper talk about a figure. They talk about, I think the participation rate of women in the workplace is even higher than the figures in a typical Western country.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I'm glad that, how the questions are progressing over here, where we started with your belief system, the role of men and women. And then finally, it's like coming to the community in general, right?
Mhm.
What are the key aspects of community in your culture?
I think traditionally just all the relatives and friends like live close by, living from the same village, from the same part of the city. But what happened in the last 20 years, I think China, with the rapid developing of China economy, so the younger folks tend to seek opportunities, outside from their village. They're basically immigrants, workers to the cities from the village. I think, for the folks who grew up in a smaller city, they tend to immigrate to like medium-sized cities, to big cities to seek more opportunities, of course. Yeah, so therefore, you can see the sense of community is changing over time as well.
Yeah, quite truly so. I think it's true for every community, right? Where
Mhm.
the traditional way of how the community was set up and how things are moving right now, they look much different than how they were originally.
Yeah.
And the final question I have for you is with regards to how do you think your beliefs and the practices and the culture which you have grown in has impacted how you perform in a business world?
I think of course, growing up in China, and received all my official education from China. So I came to the States when I was 31 years old, right? So, like hardworking, teamwork with your colleagues, respect your manager, respect authority. Uh, but after in the last 20 years, I also learned from the Western culture as well, right? Just don't be afraid of, challenge authorities as long as from a good, a good will, for the benefit of the community, for the benefit of the business, and for the benefit of society.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sounds good. Thank you, Dr. Lu, for taking the time out of your busy schedule and helping me out in this class project. Thank you once again for your time.